Marriage is the world's longest-running reality show, except nobody gets voted off until they're broke or broken. At least that's what I thought until this morning, when I discovered my wife Keena had already cast her ballot. My name is Hale Trenwick, and I'm 42 years old, with the kind of face that blends into crowds, useful in my line of work as an IT systems manager, less useful when your wife starts shopping for upgrades. I was sitting in my kitchen at 6:30 a.m., nursing coffee that tasted like disappointment, when I heard Keena's voice drifting from the living room. She was on the phone, speaking in that hushed tone people use when they think they're being clever. The smart speaker in the kitchen was still connected to the living room system, a setup I'd installed months ago and apparently forgotten to mention. Technology has a way of biting people who don't respect it. "This weekend, you're finally moving in," Keena was saying. "I'm telling him tonight. Daddy's already on my side." I nearly choked on my coffee. Daddy was Porter Kellor, Keena's father, a man who'd built a construction empire by crushing anyone who crossed him. If Porter was backing this play, I was in deeper trouble than I'd imagined. "What about Hale?" The voice on the other end was male, gravelly, familiar. Darren Holloway, Keena's ex from college, the guy who'd been sniffing around our social circle for the past year like a stray dog looking for scraps. "Hale's pathetic," Keena laughed, and the sound hit me like a slap. "He thinks I married him for love. Really, I married him because he was safe, boring, but I'm 35 now and I'm tired of safe." I set my mug down carefully, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. 20 years in IT had taught me patience, and right now, patience was the only thing keeping me from storming into that room. "Besides," Keena continued, "he's terrible in the bedroom. Remember how it used to be with us? God, I miss that." Darren's laughter crackled through the speaker. "Just wait until I'm living there full time. We'll break in every room." My jaw clenched. Our daughter Jess was 12 years old, smart as a whip, and devoted to both her parents. The thought of that greasy ex-jock strutting around my house, playing father to my kid, made my vision blur with rage. "What if he fights the custody arrangement?" Darren asked. "He won't. Hale's a coward. Always has been. He'll roll over and take whatever scraps we throw him." Keena's voice carried that satisfied tone she got when she thought she'd outmaneuvered someone. "Besides, Daddy's lawyer already has the papers ready. Hale will be out by Sunday." I sat there for another 10 minutes, listening to them plan my destruction with the casual efficiency of people ordering takeout. They discussed splitting my assets, moving Darren into my home office, even which of my belongings they'd keep as useful. When Keena finally hung up, I was already formulating my response. 20 years of marriage had taught me one crucial thing about my wife. She always underestimated people she considered beneath her. Today, that arrogance was going to cost her everything. I heard her footsteps approaching the kitchen, and I quickly switched my phone to a work email, adopting the same vacant expression I wore during her lengthy stories about yoga class drama. "Morning, honey," she said, pouring herself coffee with the same hands that had been gesturing through my character assassination 5 minutes earlier. "Morning," I replied, not looking up from my phone. She studied me for a moment, probably wondering if I'd overheard anything. Keena had always been paranoid, but never quite paranoid enough. "I need to talk to you tonight," she said finally. "About us. About our future." I met her eyes, those green eyes that had captivated me in college, before I learned they reflected nothing deeper than calculation. "Sure, Keena," I said. "I'm looking forward to it." She smiled, the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse just before the pounce. "Good. I think you'll find it enlightening." After she left for work, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the domestic debris of a marriage that had apparently ended without my knowledge. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days managing complex systems, anticipating failures, building redundancies. Yet I'd missed the most obvious system crash of all. But here's the thing about IT work. When a system fails, You don't just fix it. You analyze what went wrong, you document everything, and then you build something better. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. Porter Kellor's office occupied the top floor of the Kellor construction building, a glass and steel monument to his particular brand of ruthless competence. I'd been here exactly 3 times in 20 years of marriage, twice for family dinners that felt like business negotiations, and once when Jess was born. Porter had never particularly liked me, but he'd respected my steadiness. Today, I was counting on that respect to buy me a hearing. His secretary, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, looked surprised to see me. "Hale, does Keena know you're here?" "Not exactly," I said, "but Porter will want to hear what I have to say." She studied my face for a moment, then picked up her phone. "Mr. Kellor, your son-in-law is here. He says it's urgent." Porter's voice boomed through the speaker. "Send him in." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who'd clawed his way from poverty to prominence. Massive desk, leather furniture, walls lined with photos of Porter shaking hands with mayors, governors, and business leaders. Behind the desk sat the man himself, 68 years old, built like a bulldozer, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Hale," he said, not bothering to stand. "This is unexpected." "I need 5 minutes of your time," I said, "and I need you to listen to something." I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made that morning. Porter's expression didn't change as he listened to his daughter planning my humiliation, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes when she called me pathetic, and the way his jaw set when Darren started talking about breaking in every room of my house. When the recording ended, the silence stretched between us like a wire under tension. "That worthless piece of garbage," Porter said finally, and for a moment I thought he meant me. Then I realized he was talking about Darren. "I told Keena to stay away from him 20 years ago. Some people never learn." "She said you were backing her play," I said. Porter's laugh was harsh. "She asked me about divorce lawyers last month. I told her marriage was work, and if she wasn't willing to do the work, she shouldn't have signed up for it. Apparently, she heard what she wanted to hear." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city he'd helped build. "You know what I hate most, Hale? Freeloaders. People who want something for nothing. That boy never worked a day in his life, and now he thinks he can walk into my daughter's marriage and take what another man built." "What are you going to do about it?" I asked. Porter turned back to me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he was smiling. "We're going to teach them both a lesson about consequences." He picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Brooks, it's Porter. I need you in my office in 30 minutes. Bring everything for an emergency custody filing and a domestic relations case. Yes, today, because my daughter's about to make the biggest mistake of her life, and I'm not letting her drag my granddaughter down with her." Brooks Carvin arrived 27 minutes later, carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of a man accustomed to Porter's urgent summons. He was thin, sharp-featured, with the kind of precise manner that comes from 30 years of practicing law at the highest levels. "Hale," he said, shaking my hand. "I take it this isn't a social call." "Play him the recording," Porter said. Brooks listened without comment, occasionally making notes in a leather portfolio. When it finished, he looked up at me with something approaching respect. "You recorded this legally?" "In my own home, on my own equipment," I confirmed. "Single-party consent state." "Good." Brooks was already pulling documents from his briefcase. "Porter, I'll need your signature on an affidavit regarding financial support and housing stability. Hale, we're filing for emergency custody modification and exclusive use of the marital residence. If we move fast, we can have papers served before she gets home from work." "What about Darren?" I asked. Brooks smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Darren Holloway has 2 outstanding warrants for unpaid fines and a probation violation from 2019. One phone call to the right person, and he'll be too busy with his own problems to worry about your wife. Porter signed the affidavit with a flourish. I built my business by staying 3 steps ahead of the competition. Today, we're going to show Keena what happens when you underestimate the people around you. As Brooks headed for the courthouse, Porter and I sat in his office, planning the next phase. It felt strange, conspiring with a man who'd barely tolerated me for 2 decades, but shared enemies make for powerful alliances. She's going to try to turn this around, Porter warned. Keena's always been clever with words, and she'll play the victim if she thinks it'll work. Let her try, I said. I've got 20 years of marriage to draw from, and she's got 1 morning of pillow talk with a loser. Porter's phone rang. Brooks, calling from the courthouse. It's done, he said. Papers are filed, and the sheriff's department will serve them at 4 p.m. Hale has exclusive use of the residence, and Keena has supervised visitation pending a full hearing. What about Darren? Porter asked. Picked up an hour ago on those outstanding warrants. He'll be guests of the county for at least 48 hours. I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, the satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. In the IT world, we call it elegant problem solving, identifying the core issue and addressing it with surgical precision. One more thing, Porter said. I want Marnie to hear this from me, not from Keena's hysteria. Marnie was Keena's mother, a woman who'd spent 35 years enabling her daughter's worst impulses. This conversation was going to be interesting. Porter dialed the number and put it on speaker. Porter? Marnie's voice was cautious. She knew her husband well enough to recognize his business tone. Marnie, I need you to sit down and listen to something. He played the recording again. I watched his face as his daughter's voice filled the room, describing her husband as pathetic and planning to replace him with a man who'd never held a steady job in his adult life. When it ended, Marnie was crying. Oh, Porter, she whispered. What have we done wrong? We trusted her to make adult decisions, Porter said, but trust is earned, and she's about to learn that lesson the hard way. At 3:45 p.m., I was sitting in my living room when Keena's car pulled into the driveway. She was early, probably eager to deliver what she thought would be the knockout punch to our marriage. She walked through the front door with the confidence of someone who believes they hold all the cards. Hale, she called. We need to talk. Actually, I said, I think you're the one who needs to listen. That's when the doorbell rang. The sheriff's deputy was a woman about my age, with the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd delivered bad news professionally for years. She held a manila envelope and wore the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Hale Trenwick? She asked. Yes? Keena's voice carried that particular tone of confusion mixed with irritation that she used when reality didn't match her expectations. You've been served with emergency custody modification papers and an order for exclusive use of marital residence. You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings and vacate the premises. I watched my wife's face cycle through disbelief, confusion, and finally, rage. It was like watching someone discover that the ground they'd been standing on was actually quicksand. This is impossible, Keena said, snatching the papers. My father would never— Your father signed the supporting affidavit this afternoon, I said quietly, right after I played him the recording of your phone conversation with Darren. The color drained from her face. For 20 years, I'd watched Keena manipulate situations through charm, tears, or tantrums. Today, she was discovering what it felt like to be outmaneuvered. You recorded me? Her voice was barely a whisper. In my own home, using my own equipment, I confirmed. Perfectly legal. Also perfectly damning. She tried to call her father, but Porter had turned off his phone. She tried Darren, but of course Darren was enjoying the county's hospitality. Finally, she tried her mother. Mom? Keena's voice cracked. I need you to come over. Hale's lost his mind. I could hear Marnie crying on the other end of the line. "Oh, honey, your father played me the recording. How could you say those things?" Keena's last support system crumbled in real time. She stood in our living room, my living room now, holding a phone that might as well have been a brick. 30 minutes, the deputy reminded her. "I'll be waiting outside." What followed was the most surreal half-hour of my marriage. Keena packed with the frantic efficiency of someone whose world was collapsing, while I sat in my chair, watching 20 years of shared history get stuffed into suitcases. "This isn't over," she said, dragging the first load to her car. "Actually, it is," I replied. "You just haven't accepted it yet." By the time she finished packing, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered. News travels fast in suburbia, especially when sheriff's deputies are involved. I saw Mrs. Patterson from next door whispering to the Johnsons from across the street. By tomorrow, the whole neighborhood would know that perfect Keena Trenwick had been thrown out of her own house. As Keena loaded the last suitcase, Porter's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. He climbed out slowly, moving with the deliberate pace of a man who'd made a difficult decision and intended to see it through. "Daddy," Keena started, but Porter held up his hand. "I raised you to be better than this," he said. His voice carried across the yard, and I knew the neighbors were hearing every word. "I taught you that marriage was a commitment, that family meant something. Instead, you threw away a good man for a worthless boy who's never accomplished anything in his life." "You don't understand," Keena pleaded. "Hale and I, we're not happy. We haven't been for years." "Marriage isn't about being happy every day," Porter replied. "It's about building something together. And you just tore down 20 years of building for what? A man who couldn't even stay out of jail long enough to help you move out?" The neighbors weren't even pretending not to listen now. This was better than cable television. "Where am I supposed to go?" Keena asked. "Figure it out," Porter said. "You're an adult, or at least you're supposed to be. Act like one." He turned to me. "Jess gets home from school at 4:30. She's going to need an explanation." "I'll handle it," I said. Porter nodded and got back in his car. As he drove away, Keena stood in the driveway, surrounded by luggage, looking like a refugee from her own life. "This is temporary," she called to me. "I'll fight this." "With what lawyer?" I asked. "Your father's attorney is representing me, and unless Darren's got some money hidden away, you're going to be fighting this battle alone." She drove away without another word, leaving tire marks on the driveway and 20 years of marriage in her rearview mirror. I was still sitting on my front porch when Jess got home from school. She took one look at the neighbors dispersing and the strange expression on my face, and her 12-year-old brain started putting pieces together. "Where's Mom?" she asked. "She moved out," I said. "We're getting divorced." Jess sat down beside me on the porch steps. She was small for her age, with Keena's green eyes but my stubborn chin. Right now, she looked older than her years. "Is it because of that guy who's been calling the house?" she asked. "You knew about Darren?" "I'm not stupid, Dad. Mom's been acting weird for months, and she always left the room when he called." Jess leaned against my shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I'm going to be," I said. And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. That night, after Jess went to bed, I sat in my kitchen with a beer and thought about the day's events. In 12 hours, I'd gone from being the victim of someone else's scheme to being the architect of my own defense. But this was just the opening move. Keena wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully, and when she regrouped, she'd come back swinging. I needed to be ready. I pulled out my laptop and started documenting everything. The recording, the legal filings, the neighbors who'd witnessed her public humiliation. In IT, we call it building redundancy into the system. In real life, it's called covering your assets. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I smiled and screenshot the message. Evidence for the harassment file I was already building. Let her come. I was just getting started. 3 days after Keena's dramatic exit, I was beginning to understand why they say revenge is a dish best served cold. The initial satisfaction of outmaneuvering her was wearing off, replaced by the steady burn of anger at 20 years of being underestimated. Jess was handling the situation better than I'd expected. Kids are resilient, and she'd apparently been aware of the tension between her mother and me long before I'd caught on. Still, I could see the strain in her eyes, the way she watched me carefully, as if I might disappear too. "Dad," she said over breakfast. "Mom called me last night." I set down my coffee cup. "What did she say?" "She wants me to ask you to let her come home. She said it was all a misunderstanding." "What did you tell her?" Jess looked at me with those serious green eyes. "I told her I heard her on the phone with that guy. I told her I knew she was planning to make him my new stepdad without asking me." Smart kid. Too smart, maybe, but that was better than the alternative. "She started crying," Jess continued. "Said I didn't understand adult relationships." "Do you want to see her?" "Yeah, but not if she's going to lie to me. I'm not a little kid anymore, Dad." That afternoon, Brooks Carvin called with an update. Keena's hired representation, Janet Morrison from Morrison & Associates. She's good, but she's working with a weak hand. "What's their strategy?" "They're claiming you manipulated Porter against his own daughter, that the recording was taken out of context, and that you're an unfit father because you've alienated Jess from her mother." I laughed. Alienated her? Keena did that herself when she planned to replace me with her ex-boyfriend. That's essentially what I told Morrison. But be prepared. They're going to make this ugly. Keena's desperate, and desperate people make dangerous decisions. Brooks was right. That evening, I got a call from my supervisor at work. "Hale, I need to ask you about some allegations we received today." My stomach dropped. "What kind of allegations?" "Someone called HR claiming you've been using company equipment for personal surveillance. They also suggested you might be accessing confidential employee information inappropriately." "That's ridiculous," I said. "Who made the complaint?" "It was anonymous, but I have to investigate. Can you come in early tomorrow? Bring any personal devices you've used for work in the past month." After I hung up, I sat in my living room admiring Keena's strategy. She couldn't attack me legally, so she was going after my livelihood. It was clever, I had to admit. Also, completely predictable. I called Brooks. "She's trying to get me fired," I told him. "Can she?" "Not if I handle this right, but it's going to be messy." The next morning, I arrived at work with my laptop, phone, and a folder full of documentation. My supervisor, Janet Walsh, was a fair woman who'd worked with me for 8 years. She knew my character, but she also had a company to protect. "This is uncomfortable for both of us," she said. "But I have to ask, have you used company resources for personal matters recently?" "I recorded a conversation in my own home using my personal phone," I said. "The conversation involved my wife planning to divorce me and move her boyfriend into my house. I used that recording to protect my custody rights and my residence." I handed her the folder. "Here's the timeline, the legal documentation, and a statement from my attorney confirming that everything I did was legal and appropriate." Janet reviewed the documents, her expression growing more sympathetic as she read. "Hale, I'm sorry you're going through this, but I have to ask, do you think your wife made this complaint? I think my wife is desperate and angry, and she's trying to destroy my life because I didn't roll over and let her destroy it first." Janet closed the folder. "I'm going to document this conversation and close the investigation, but I'd recommend you be extra careful about keeping personal and professional activities separate until this divorce is finalized." Understood. That afternoon, I decided it was time to shift from defense to offense. Keena wanted to play dirty? Fine, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was the IT guy. I knew how to find information. I started with social media. Keena had always been careful about her online presence, but people leave digital footprints everywhere. It took me 3 hours to piece together a timeline of her relationship with Darren, using tagged photos, location check-ins, and mutual friends posts. What I found was illuminating. Keena and Darren had been in contact for over a year, not the few months I'd assumed. There were photos of them together at restaurants, bars, even a weekend trip to the coast that had supposedly been a girl's getaway with her sister. But the real prize was buried in the metadata of a photo Darren had posted 6 months ago, a picture of himself in what was clearly my living room taken while I was at work. The timestamp showed it was during a day when Keena had claimed to be sick. I printed everything and called Brooks. "I need to add some evidence to our file," I said. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that proves this affair has been going on for over a year, and that Darren was in my house while I was at work." Brooks was quiet for a moment. "Hale, this is good work, but I have to ask, how did you obtain this information? Publicly available social media posts and metadata. Nothing illegal, nothing hacked, nothing that requires special access. Bring it to my office. We're going to have a very interesting conversation with Morrison and Associates." That evening, Keena called. Her voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "You got me fired," she said. "I got you fired? How exactly did I manage that?" "Don't play dumb. Someone sent my boss screenshots of my social media posts, along with a timeline showing when I was supposedly sick, but was actually out." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Keena, if your boss fired you because of your own social media posts, maybe the problem isn't who sent them. Maybe the problem is what they showed." "You're destroying my life." "No," I said. "I'm documenting how you destroyed it yourself. There's a difference." She hung up, but not before I heard her crying. 20 years of marriage had taught me to recognize the sound of Keena's tears, and these weren't the manipulative tears she used to get her way. These were the tears of someone who'd finally realized the consequences of their choices. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. 2 weeks after Keena's termination, Darren was released from county lockup. I knew this because my security system alerted me to movement in my driveway at 2 a.m., and the cameras captured him stumbling around my property like a bargain basement burglar. He didn't try to break in, even Darren wasn't that stupid, but he did key my car and kick over my mailbox before wandering off into the night. I had it all on high-definition video, complete with clear shots of his face and license plate. The next morning, I filed a police report and sent copies of the footage to Brooks. By noon, Darren had been arrested again, this time for vandalism and violating the restraining order that had been issued as part of the custody arrangement. "He's becoming a liability for Keena," Brooks observed when I called him with the update. "Her attorney's going to advise her to distance herself from him. Will she listen? That depends on how desperate she is." The answer came that afternoon when Keena showed up at Jess's school. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her visitation was supervised and scheduled for weekends, but she'd apparently decided to take matters into her own hands. I got the call from the principal at 3:15. "Mr. Trenwick, we have a situation. Your wife is here demanding to take Jess home, but our records show she doesn't have custody." "Don't let her take my daughter," I said, already grabbing my keys. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. I arrived to find Keena in the principal's office, arguing with Mrs. Henderson while Jess sat in a chair looking embarrassed and angry. "This is ridiculous," Keena was saying. "She's my daughter. I have every right—" "Actually, you don't," I said from the doorway. "You have supervised visitation on weekends, and this is neither." Keena spun around, her face flushed with anger. "Hale, I should have known you'd turn everyone against me." "I didn't turn anyone against you, Keena. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions." Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "Keena, you need to leave, now. I want to talk to my daughter." I looked at Jess, who shook her head slightly. "She doesn't want to talk to you right now," I said. "You've poisoned her against me." "No, Keena. You did that yourself when you decided to replace her father with your boyfriend." The words hit home. Keena's composure cracked, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 20 years ago, vulnerable, scared, and completely out of her depth. "I made mistakes," she whispered, "but she's still my daughter." "Then act like her mother," I said. "Follow the custody arrangement. Show up for your scheduled visits. Prove that you can put her needs ahead of your own for once in your life." Keena left without another word, but I could see this wasn't over. Desperate people don't give up easily, and Keena was running out of options. That evening, Jess and I had a long talk about what had happened at school. "I was embarrassed," she admitted. "Everyone was staring, and Mom was acting crazy." "She's going through a difficult time," I said, trying to be fair despite everything. "That's not an excuse to act like a child," Jess replied. "I'm 12, and I know better than to throw tantrums in public." Smart kid. Too smart. "Do you want to see her this weekend?" I asked. "Do I have to?" "The court says you do, but if you're really uncomfortable, we can ask for modifications." Jess considered this. "I'll see her, but I want you to be there." "That's what supervised visitation means. I'll be there." Friday evening, Keena arrived for her scheduled visit looking like she'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. "Hello, Jess," she said softly. "Hi, Mom." They hugged awkwardly, and I felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy. This was still my daughter's mother, regardless of what had happened between us. "Can we go to dinner?" Keena asked. "Sure," I said. "Where did you have in mind?" "I thought maybe just Jess and I could—" "Supervised means I'm there, Keena. That's not negotiable." We ended up at a family restaurant where the 3 of us sat around a table making stilted conversation, while other families enjoyed their normal Friday night dinners. Keena tried to act like nothing had changed, asking Jess about school and friends, but the strain was obvious. "Are you and Darren still together?" Jess asked suddenly. Keena nearly choked on her water. "That's complicated, honey. It's a yes or no question, Mom. We're taking a break while I figure things out." "So yes, then." I stayed quiet, letting Jess handle the conversation. She was doing fine on her own. "Do you regret it?" Jess asked. "Regret what?" "Leaving Dad, leaving me, choosing Darren over your family." Keena's eyes filled with tears. "It's not that simple, Jess. Adults have needs that children don't understand." "I understand that you got bored with us and decided to trade us in for something more exciting," Jess said. "I also understand that it didn't work out the way you planned." "Jess," I warned, but she was on a roll. "I heard you on the phone, Mom. I heard you call Dad pathetic. I heard you laugh about how bad he was in the bedroom. I heard you planning to let Darren move into our house and act like my father." Keena was crying openly now. "I never meant for you to hear that." "But you meant to do it. That's the part I don't understand. How could you want to hurt us like that?" "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be happy." "And we were making you unhappy?" Keena didn't answer, which was answer enough. The rest of the dinner passed in silence. When I dropped Keena off at her apartment, a 1-bedroom place above a dry cleaner, she looked like a ghost of her former self. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not turning her against me completely. You could have, but you didn't." "She's your daughter too, Keena. I won't try to change that." She nodded and walked up the stairs to her apartment, shoulders slumped in defeat. But I knew this wasn't over. Cornered animals are dangerous, and Keena was definitely cornered. The storm hit on a Tuesday night in late October, one of those autumn tempests that remind you winter is coming whether you're ready or not. I was working late in my home office when the security system chimed, indicating movement at the front door. The camera feed showed a figure huddled against the rain, and it took me a moment to recognize Keena. She was soaked through, her hair plastered to her head, looking like a refugee from her own life. I opened the door before she could knock. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I need to talk to you," she said, shivering. "Please, Hale, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in the entryway, dripping on the hardwood floor we'd picked out together 15 years ago, looking around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. "Jess is asleep," I said quietly. "I know. I waited until her bedtime." Keena wrapped her arms around herself. "I've been sitting in my car for 2 hours trying to figure out what to say." "And what did you decide?" "That I'm sorry. That I made a terrible mistake. That I want to come home." I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to over 20 years of marriage. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. "It's too late for that, Keena." "Is it? Really?" She stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of alcohol on her breath. Not drunk, but not sober either. "We had 20 good years together. Doesn't that count for something?" "We had 20 years, I corrected. "Whether they were good is apparently a matter of perspective." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I know what I said on that phone call. I know how it sounded. But I was angry, and I was confused, and I said things I didn't mean." "Which part didn't you mean? The part where you called me pathetic? The part where you laughed about our intimate life? Or the part where you planned to move your boyfriend into my house and have him play father to my daughter?" "All of it," she whispered. "I was trying to convince myself that leaving you was the right thing to do, so I said terrible things to make it easier. And now? Now I realize what I gave up, what I threw away. Darren is—" She shook her head. "He's not you, Hale. He's not steady or reliable or kind. He's selfish and lazy, and he only wanted me because I represented security. So you're here because your backup plan didn't work out? I'm here because I realized you were never my backup plan. You were my real life, and I traded it for a fantasy." I wanted to feel satisfaction at her admission, but all I felt was tired. Tired and sad, and older than my 42 years. "It doesn't matter now," I said. "Too much has happened. Too much has been said. It matters to me." Keena reached for my hand, and I let her take it. Her fingers were cold and trembling. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything we built together. But I love you, Hale. I've always loved you. You have a funny way of showing it. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I can't even breathe sometimes." We stood there in the entryway, holding hands like teenagers, while the storm raged outside. For a moment, I could almost imagine taking her back, almost imagine rebuilding what we'd had. Then I remembered the recording, the laughter, the casual cruelty of her words. "I can't do this, Keena," I said, gently pulling my hand away. "I can't go back to wondering if you mean what you say, or if you're just telling me what you think I want to hear. You'll never have to wonder again. I swear to you. Your promises don't mean anything anymore," I said. "You promised to love and honor me 20 years ago, and you broke that promise the first time you decided I wasn't exciting enough for you." She started crying then, the ugly, wrenching sobs of someone whose world has collapsed completely. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But you can't come back here. This isn't your home anymore. It was our home for 20 years. And you gave it up for a man who couldn't even stay out of jail long enough to help you move out." The words were harsh, but they were true. Keena had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. "Can I see Jess before I go? She's asleep, and you're not supposed to be here unsupervised anyway." Keena nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Will you tell her I came by? Will you tell her I love her?" "I'll tell her." She walked to the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Hale, you were never pathetic. You were the best man I ever knew, and I was too stupid to appreciate it. Goodbye, Keena." She left without another word, disappearing into the storm like a ghost returning to haunt someone else's dreams. I locked the door and stood in the quiet house, listening to the rain against the windows and the sound of my own breathing. 20 years of marriage over. Just like that. But as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to check on Jess, I realized something. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely in my own home. The next morning, I told Jess about her mother's visit. "What did you tell her?" she asked. "I told her it was too late." Jess nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think she meant it? About being sorry?" "I think she meant it in the moment," I said. "But meaning it and being able to change are two different things." "Are you sad?" "A little, but mostly I'm relieved." "Me too," Jess admitted. "Is that terrible?" "No, sweetheart, it's honest." That afternoon, Brooks called with news. "Keena's attorney wants to discuss a settlement," he said. "Apparently, she's ready to accept your terms." "What changed her mind?" "Reality, I'd guess. She's unemployed, her boyfriend's in jail again, and she's living in a one-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner. Fighting you in court isn't going to improve her situation." "What are her terms?" "Standard visitation, no alimony, and she keeps her car and personal belongings. In exchange, she wants you to agree not to pursue her for the money she spent on Darren during the affair." "How much money are we talking about?" "According to our forensic accountant, about $15,000 over the past year. Restaurants, hotels, that weekend trip to the coast." I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. "Deal." "Just like that?" "Brooks, I've got my house, my daughter, and my self-respect. She can keep the $15,000. Consider it payment for 20 years of pretending to be someone I wasn't." "And who were you pretending to be?" "Someone who deserved to be treated the way she treated me." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Keena didn't contest anything, didn't ask for more than the settlement offered, didn't even show up to the final hearing. Her attorney said she'd moved back to her hometown, 300 miles away, to stay with her sister while she figured out her next move. I felt nothing when the judge signed the papers. No relief, no sadness, no anger. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job completed. That evening, Jess and I celebrated with pizza and a movie. As we sat on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn, she looked up at me with those serious green eyes. "Dad?" "Yeah? Are you going to be okay?" "We're going to be fine, kiddo. Better than fine." And for the first time in 20 years, I actually believed it. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows, but inside, our house was warm and quiet and ours. Just the way it should be.